Now, as most of you probably already know, in the last few days there's been plenty of interesting Star Wars news to come out, including a few new details about the upcoming live-action Star Wars show produced by Jon Favreau, the first reviews for Solo, the anthology movie, as well as some supposed leaks concerning the script or story for Episode 9, and about the Obi-Wan Anthology movie now being in pre-production. So before I get to some of your comments from this week's videos, I'll touch on all that, starting with the leaks and, in particular, the leak about Episode 9, which many have asked me to comment on. And honestly, it's probably 100% made up by somebody somewhere, and though I certainly don't begrudge anyone who enjoys supposed leaked plot stories or videos, they've never really been my thing to discuss or comment on, and that's likely not going to change going forward. Yes, I'm obviously a big fan of theory videos, which you could say are closely related to these type of videos when you really think about it, and I'm sure I'll be making plenty more theories in the future, but I'll leave the leak plot videos alone for better or worse, and I'll close out this topic by reminding people about how many leaks there were concerning Snoke and his origins for Episode 8, or how the Knights of Ren were going to show up at the First Jedi Temple. And looking back, I just wish they'd shown up at all. As for the rumors about the Obi-Wan Anthology movie being in pre-production and scheduled for a December 2020 release, well, it seems odd that it would literally be in the works without us having gotten some kind of official announcement by now. I mean, what are Disney and Lucasfilm waiting for? Most fans seem very, very open to the prospect of an Obi-Wan movie, so why not announce it already and maybe put a smile on the face of some of the fans who might still have a bitter taste in their mouths after The Last Jedi? Hell, May the 4th or Star Wars Day just went by, and that would have been about the perfect time to make such an announcement, in my opinion. Then again, maybe they didn't want anything distracting from Solo coming out in just under 2 weeks now, and plan on making the official announcement shortly thereafter. Either way, I do think we'll eventually get the Obi-Wan movie, or maybe I should say an anthology movie with Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan in it, because I think one possibility that not many are considering is that it might be a much broader story set between Episode 3 and 4 that simply includes Obi-Wan but doesn't necessarily center around him. As I've suggested before, why not kill two birds with one stone and make it a movie about Vader hunting down the last of the Jedi, or even have the main character be a new Jedi we've never seen before, who survived Order 66 and is now on the run from Vader and the Inquisitors and somehow runs into Kenobi. Because as much as I do love the idea of the Kenobi movie, I think you have to be careful with it on a couple different levels. First of all, it greatly changes our perception of Kenobi if he, say, leaves Tatooine for any reason during this time period and leaves Luke unprotected. And although I'm fine with a smaller scale Star Wars movie that never leaves Tatooine and, dare I say, is more of a drama than anything else and essentially just shows us the personal struggles of Obi-Wan, most people who go to see a Star Wars movie want just that, Star Wars. That's why I think if the movie does get made, it will be much larger in scope and scale and will, like it or not, include Darth Vader in some respect. And I say like it or not because I do know there are some people out there who don't want to see Vader overused, while others who would likely be happy if he showed up all the time everywhere. Moving on then to the little tidbits we learned about the live-action series being done by Jon Favreau. Well, initial reports said it would take place 7 years after the Battle of Endor, but now it seems it actually takes place 7 years after the Battle of Yavin, or the end of A New Hope, which would instead means it takes place about 2.5 years after the Battle of Endor, or the end of Return of the Jedi, and a year and a half after the Battle of Jakku, which was at the end of the Aftermath series, and hopefully that all just made sense to you. Now, what I actually found most interesting about this announcement, and maybe this is just the hopeful fan in me, but instead of just saying it takes place 2 or 3 years after the end of Return of the Jedi, which you would think he would do, Favreau actually used the Star Wars calendar system most well known or used by fans, the whole BBY or ABY system, or before or after the Battle of Yavin. Again, maybe I'm just being hopeful, or maybe I'm just looking for something to be excited about, but to me, this might imply he has more of a grasp on Star Wars than others in charge of current or former Star Wars projects do. Anyway, keeping in mind he said the show would focus on new characters, I'm not sure how much it'll focus on the creation of the New Republic, for example, considering how difficult that'd be to do without featuring already well-known characters. I mean, how do you do a show about rebuilding the New Republic without Leia and Mon Mothma being key elements in the show? Maybe then it'll focus on the remnants of the Empire's transformation into the First Order and show how they find Snoke and how he takes over, Though I wouldn't hold my breath on that either, because that sounds, I guess you could say, too dark of an overall tone for a live action show that will basically launch and have to sell Disney's streaming service to the masses. Then again, one of the biggest gripes with The Last Jedi was Snoke and his lack of a backstory. So maybe at least part of the show could try to rectify that problem and tell us where he comes from. And before anyone asks me this in the comments below, no, I don't think it'll have anything to do with Ahsoka and Sabine's hunt for Ezra. Not that it wouldn't be one of my personal top choices, mind you. But being real here, this show is likely going to have a much larger and broader audience than Rebels did. And making a show based off the ending of another show that, again, being real, not a lot of people in the grand scheme of things watched, would be a mistake. This show will be as accessible as possible, which is likely why, at least at the start, it'll be about a totally new cast of characters that nobody knows anything about, and they'll be doing their own thing in some respect with only loose ties to the rest of the canon, just enough to make it feel like Star Wars. Moving on then to the initial reactions Solo is getting, and I say reactions because so far we've really only gotten some Twitter posts, no actual reviews or anything of that sort. Anyway, so far they've been rather positive, and there's even been plenty of praise for Alden Ehrenreich's Han Solo. And I know some people will immediately say these are just Disney shills doing their thing and giving Disney and Star Wars praise no matter what. But I'm going to choose to be hopeful here and continue to keep an open mind and realistic expectations for this movie, and believe that I may very well walk out of it being happy and having enjoyed it. And if you're one of those people who's going to boycott Solo or wait till it comes out on Blu-ray or digital or whatever else, I won't tell you or try to convince you to do otherwise. It's your money. Do with it as you will, and if you don't want to support the current iteration of Star Wars, that's up to you. As for me, I'm a long way from giving up just yet, and if I ever do walk away from this franchise, then things must have gotten really bad. Nevertheless, no matter what, my appreciation for the original trilogy, and yes, even the prequels, can never be tarnished by whatever the future for this franchise may hold. Okay, now I'm going to move on to just the top comments from some of my last few videos here. And yes, I realize I didn't do a Let's Talk Some Star Wars video last week, and you have my apologies for that. As sometimes is the case, I just never found the time to do it. Anyway, the top comment from my video about where did the real diversity in Star Wars go came to us from Darth Bane, who simply said, "The Sith accept all races." And though this is of course very true, that the last thing the Sith seemed worried about is race, there's something else here that I would like to touch on, and that's the fact that Star Wars fans accept all races, genders, and even species, as long as they're good characters. Because in all my time of being a Star Wars fan, which is my entire life, I've never once heard anyone say anything bad about the character of Princess Leia, who obviously was a female character. Same goes for Lando Calrissian, who, again, I'm stating the obvious here, but was black. And why does no one ever complain about them? Well, simply put, because they were great characters set within a great story. What they looked like or what gender they were didn't matter, as it shouldn't. But then you move on to the prequels, and people do complain about the characters there. And one of the most complained about characters is Anakin Skywalker, both the younger version played by Jake Lloyd and the older version played by Hayden Christensen. And not that I'm trying to make some type of strange reverse racism argument here, but never has anyone made the claim that they were being so harshly judged because they were either white or male. They only criticize them for poor acting, and probably rightfully so, let's be honest here. And my point is that there's already a precedence for Star Wars fans to gladly accept characters of different races and genders, as the original trilogy clearly shows us. And there's also a precedence of calling out poorly written or acted characters, as the prequels showed us. So why is it assumed that any criticism levied against a character, such as Rey, are gender motivated, and not simply because she's a poorly written character? And look, if you like or love the character of Rey, that's completely fine by me and fine by most fans. That's your prerogative to enjoy the character. But the fact cannot be ignored that many fans do not like her, and to in any way imply that means most of them, or even a sizable number of them, dislike her simply because she's a female is ridiculous. And I'm not trying to say racism and sexism don't exist in the real world, or that every single Star Wars fan believes in absolute equality for all. I'm just saying, on the whole, Star Wars fans care about one thing in relation to their beloved franchise. They care about Star Wars. They care if the character is good and if they fit into the story. That's it. Most fans don't give a damn if Rey is a man or a woman and would have had the same complaints about him that they do about her. The only real difference here is that if Rey were a male character, I don't think he would have necessarily been labeled, like how the female Rey has been labeled a Mary Sue. And honestly, I think it's that label that has incensed those who steadfastly defend her or think the only reason she's being criticized in the first place is because she's a woman. And though most who call her a Mary Sue don't intend it as some type of gender-motivated insult, it has become that nonetheless, and been a big part of what I think is a huge misunderstanding between fans who do have legitimate gripes about the character, and those who think it's all motivated by sexism. Moving on then to my video comparing Infinity War to The Last Jedi, and the top rated comment from that, and it kind of goes along with the theme I've had running here in this entire video, comes to us from Darth Troller, who basically says that if Kathleen Kennedy had the Infinity Gauntlet, that she'd wipe out half the fandom, which I must admit I got a legitimate laugh out of. And to be honest here, I'm not a huge fan of Kathleen Kennedy's, at all, but it's probably not entirely for the reasons a lot of other fans absolutely hate her, because I know many think she has her own agenda and cares about nothing else beyond that agenda, and I can't really speak to all that one way or the other. I don't know the extent of her agenda, nor do I know how much her agenda is something politically motivated and how much it's more motivated on just wanting to make as much money as possible and, financially speaking, turning Lucasfilm into an even greater success than it already is. And none of that was meant as a defense of Kathleen Kennedy, nor is what I'm about to say. But she is the president of Lucasfilm, which means she is essentially the one who answers to Disney, which cannot be an easy job. All that being said, my biggest complaint against her is I don't get any sense of passion as a Star Wars fan out of her. I don't know that she really loves and cares about Star Wars. Hell, I don't know that she's even a Star Wars fan per se. I don't know that if you sat her down and talked to her that she'd be able to hold her own in a conversation about the ins and outs of the actual Star Wars galaxy. And one of the things that bugged me the most about her is a few years ago when she came out at Star Wars Celebration wearing a Star Wars t-shirt and had to show it off as if to say, see, I'm a Star Wars fan just like you, when no real Star Wars fan would do that. And even though I could be dead wrong here, and these are just my gut feelings really, I don't know that the woman running Star Wars right now even loves Star Wars, which seems mind-boggling to me. And honestly, I do think she is part of the problem, but not necessarily because of an agenda, though it could certainly be part of it, but rather because she just doesn't seem to get it. She doesn't seem to understand what fans love about Star Wars because, well, she isn't one of us. Again, at least as far as I can tell, and I base that only again off my gut feelings and what I get from her in interviews or what I've read in articles about her. Yes, I could be way off track here, and there does have to be a reason why George Lucas himself appointed her the president before he sold Lucasfilm, right? Well, that's all I've got for you this time. I know this was a little bit different format for my Let's Talk Some Star Wars series, and I didn't get to many of your questions and comments, but I've pretty much decided to just let the series be whatever it needs to be week in and week out. Some weeks I'll focus more on news, others more on comments from previous videos, and others I'll still put up a discussion starter video earlier in the week, and then focus entirely on the comments from that. Anyway, for now, feel free to leave your comments below on anything I brought up in this video, and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.